Hey guys, what's up and welcome back to Monique. If you guys are new here, then what is up? My name is Erica. Heya, how you doing? And if you're into the history of the ancient Greeks and the Romans, maybe you're just into the mythology and maybe just like the rest of us, you read the Wolf Den and you were like, holy crap, I've got loads of questions for this lady because this is so good. Yeah, me too. So this is not only the video for you, but this is also the channel for you. You guys are gonna wanna hit that subscribe button and the bell icon so that you know every single time I post in the future. But as you can see from the title of today's video, I'm so excited because I will be chatting to the author of the Wolf Den herself, Ms. Elodie Harper. Elodie and I have been trying to chat for quite a while, but due to our conflicting schedules, I used to work at a pub. Elodie seemed to only be free in the evening. It just wasn't working out. But now I finally have the chance to sit her down and to ask her my zillion questions. I have so many. Oh my God, I need to simmer down when I read. As per normal though, this video will not go into what the book is about. So if you want to see what I had to say about the Wolf Den or just a quick review in order to refresh your memory, then definitely hit that white or black thing. I don't know what it is on your screen, but whatever color it is, hit that to check out my review either right now or throughout the video, whatever it is, just you can check it out if you want to, it's there. Now, if you've watched my previous interview with Jennifer Saint, then you'll know what I'm about to say, and that is that my interviews tend to work in tandem with other interviews that have already done by my friends of the classics community. And much like in my Jennifer Saint video where I mentioned Liv Albert and Kelly Maguire, who had both done interviews with Jennifer, both of them have also done interviews with Elodie. And so therefore, this interview is working based off of those two. So I do highly suggest that you do listen to Liv's on Myths Baby and you do listen to Kelly's on World History Encyclopedia. Check both of those interviews out. And so today we're going to be asking you questions that they didn't get to, which I'm super excited about because I think it's good to build off of other people's content already. So that way, hopefully all of your questions and all of my questions get answered by the authors. So in saying that, without further ado, I'm so excited to go and call Elodie. So like, I'm just gonna go do that.
Thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to be here.
So let's start with talking about the Wolf Den as a whole, because the whole plot is the daily lives of these women who have sort of, extraordinary is the wrong word, but it's not an ordinary life because they live in a brothel. But you follow them doing these really ordinary things like going to the bar, which I loved because it's so relatable, and going to the baths, and even the Saturnalia had such like a Christmassy feel to it in the book, for lack of a better word. So why was it important to you to have these women doing such ordinary activities through their crazy life?
Well, you know, it's funny, you've actually hit on what was, for me, in many ways, the entire point of the book, in that I wanted to take these women who are known for just one thing, the fact that they sold sex, they had to sell themselves in this incredibly famous building in Pompeii. It's still really famous, you can visit it, you know, it's in an extraordinary state of preservation, the graffiti, the paintings on the walls, you know, which I was able to describe in my book what I'd actually seen. And you know, it's kind of, people make fun of it a bit when they go, it's like, oh, tee-hee, we're in the brothel. And I wanted the women to be having their own laugh, really, to be laughing back, if you like. And I didn't want to sort of continue the stigma and the obsession about the fact that they were obliged to sell sex. We know that about them. So what else is there to say about their lives? I really wanted to think about them as whole people. You know, what would they have done in the day? How would they have socialized? You know, what sort of friendships would they have made? What sort of respite would they have had? You know, you mentioned the women's baths, and the Saturnalia is actually, you know, like an early precursor of Christmas. And it was also a really big festival for slaves because it's when enslaved people got to have a day off, basically. So yeah, I wanted to think about the lives of people who are very marginalized, or when they are focused on, a lot of the time it tends to be as kind of the butt of jokes or really salacious or a bit prurient. So I wanted to turn that on its head, if you like.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you did such a good job of that as well, because even though they are prostitutes, that's not what we focus on. It's more so like a background story to them. So we are focused on how the women interact, their friendships, which are so beautifully done. Like, as you said also, well, not yesterday when this uploads, but you said in a chat with Exeter Library, you were talking about how that was sort of how we relate to them as well, that they have friendships that we know. You know, like, oh, I would hang out with my friend like that.
Yes, exactly. And particularly the time they spend in the baths when it's, there are only women there. So they're not performing for men. I think we see them when they're trying to charm customers or drum up business, it's very fake and they're having to put on a front. And then you see them with each other, which is much more genuine, much warmer. I mean, sometimes, harshness and rivalry and all sorts of things as well. But, they were torn away from their actual families. And the only family that they've got is each other. The only sort of semi-permanent relationships that they have are with each other as well, because they can't really form permanent or secure romantic relationships. They can't get married. They have each other and the sort of local neighborhood, the local waiter. I didn't want all the guys to be awful. So, I wanted to give a real sense of Pompeii street life, because the archaeological site it's preserved so beautifully. So you can go into these bars or fast food joints or whatever and see what the street life was like. So I wanted to put the women there. And, women generally wouldn't have frequented taverns, but prostituted women, they weren't respectable. So it was somewhere you could imagine them being.
Well, actually, that's something I really wanted to ask you about in regards to how we have everything from Pompeii. That's why people love it, because you can go and walk down the streets and you've been, so you've literally done that, which I'm so jealous about, but it's okay. I'm just going to live through this book. But did that intimidate you to have to write about Pompeii? Because it is a site that we have literal bread from it. Like, for the viewers who don't know, we have such little parts of their society that we know of. Was that scary?
I guess so, but it was also honestly quite a help, because it meant I didn't have to imagine absolutely everything. I didn't have to make everything up. Like, loads of stuff was there, so I could write about what I've actually seen. And what I didn't want to do was get completely hung up on the whole of Pompeii and obsessed with the geography and recreating precise houses. I recreated some specific buildings, so the Lupanar and the sort of precise layout of that neighborhood. So the Elephant Inn was a real place directly opposite, and Citius is recorded as the landlord there. And I called the other inn the Sparrow. That wasn't a name that's recorded. That's one that I made up based on other names of bars in Pompeii. So I tried to have a very accurate representation of that very small neighborhood that people would then be able to visit. But, the town as a whole, I wasn't kind of obsessively poring over maps, because we haven't even excavated all of it. So there are big chunks that we don't know about. But then the grander homes that I describe are based on actual homes that I've seen. So the things that you see in them are the type of stuff that you will see in Pompeii. But I didn't kind of obsessively map out precise houses. And like the frescoes that you see in the Naples Museum, the type of style of frescoes, it was very easy to invent other frescoes that you might see.
Well, with my favorite house even was Pliny's house. Like, I so badly wanted to be there, just with the way that you described it and the courtyard that Amara sits in. I was like, oh, I want to be there so badly. But also because you said, you have these little bits in the houses where I did recognize it, even though it wasn't the exact house. Like in Pliny's, I think you had a faun in the middle of the atrium.
It was very, very loosely some elements from the House of the Faun. So it isn't, an exact replica of the House of the Faun, but I took some elements from that house to create it's not actually belonging to Pliny, but the house that Pliny's in. So so exactly. So things that people who visited the site or know about the site might pick up on without it being kind of exact layout.
I mean, it made me want to go to Pompeii, because I haven't been, and I didn't know anything about the Lupanar. I learned about Pompeii for GCSE, and then, I did hear in one of your other interviews that you went to the British Museum exhibition. I went to that.
I'm not actually been. I'm planning to go.
The one 10 years ago.
Oh, the one 10 years ago. Yes, it was amazing. Honestly, that was what started off my fascination with Pompeii, that extraordinary exhibition. It really, and the more I think about it, in retrospect, the more extraordinary I think that exhibition was. It recreated a bar with the frescoes on the wall. It recreated a whole garden with the frescoes and the sculptures.
Yeah, with the lights and everything on the side.
It's astounding. The closest thing that I've ever experienced, actually going to Pompeii, And I'd say the museum in Naples is as astounding as the site, really, because that's where so many of the treasures are kept, and particularly the frescoes. I mean, it's extraordinary to wander around and see these paintings that people 2,000 years ago were looking at. You know, it's amazing.
I mean, and also something that I think you did really well in regards to what Pompeii looked like was how you described the brothel, because I didn't know anything about it. And so the way you described it, I was a bit like, okay, well, this might be the fiction side of the novel. And then I Googled it and I was like, this is exactly what it was like. And it completely blew my mind that there's this whole building that's there that you can just recreate in your book. And I got such a vivid image of what that was like, even though obviously the women inside it were the fictional part of it. But the building was so wonderfully done in your book.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, you know, it has been reconstructed and also preserved quite remarkably. So, you know, I visited it a number of times, most evocatively at night, because it's often very crowded because it's such a popular site. But at night, when I was the only person in there, that was what really ended up being the inspiration for describing it, because it was a very haunting place then. You know, it wasn't kind of like everyone snapping pictures of the erotic frescoes with their phones, etc. You had a real sense of sadness and of loss, really, you know, that everyone who lived and worked there died 2,000 years ago. So it is, you know, Pompeii is quite a haunting place for that reason too. But although the women, you know, we don't know about them particularly, I did use the graffiti in the brothel to name some of the characters. So Paris, Felix, Beronice, Cressa, and Victoria are all names in the brothel. Paris is almost certainly, he's called Beautiful Paris on the wall, so almost certainly was prostituted. And Victoria, she refers to herself as Victoria Victrix, Victoria the Conqueress, in a number of bits of graffiti. So I made her quite a forceful character.
I love that, though, you focused mostly on slaves in the book. And by that, I mean not only the women, but you also focused on, like, you know, Pliny's slave Secundus you have the mention of the gladiators, who most people don't realize, but slaves too in that society. We have Menander. Oh my God, my heart broke every single time you wrote about Menander. I was like, I just want him to be happy. But like, I thought it was such an interesting route that you took by just writing about all these people on the same playing field, as opposed to, you know, their interaction with the elite.
I find it really fascinating, some of the work that's been done over the, you know, recent years, in trying to think about the internal world of the enslaved people of the Roman era, and also the freed people. You sometimes have to go in that route because there's more evidence left behind by freed men and women, to try, because they wrote so little for themselves. Trying to understand how the world looked like from their perspective is quite a sort of jigsaw process, but it felt very important to do that, because I think because the Roman era is so distant to us, it's easy to kind of gloss over the slavery or think, oh, well, it was just such a different time. But actually the things that people had to endure, you know, we've not changed that much as human beings for our responses to be all that different to it. That I felt was important. And that, you know, just because they were looked down on by the elite doesn't mean that's how they viewed themselves. Of course, some people will internalize shame, etc. But, you know, they would have had a different awareness of life. So I wanted to try and think about it from that point of view. That was really important to me, for both the men and the women. And actually, it was one of the ways that it's really not a book in which all the men are monsters. So even Felix, who is kind of a monster, the brothel owner, the pimp, you know, the more that we learn about him in the book, the more, if not sympathetic, the more understandable perhaps he becomes, because he has had such a brutal life and he has become a really brutal person. But it's, you know, he's not just a random psychopath.
But I enjoyed that aspect. I thought all of them were very grey. Even Amara, like, she became very, very
She becomes
grey.
more and more like Felix.
Exactly. And I felt that made them so much more fun to read about, because you didn't write about any of them as being, you know, this one is fantastic and this one is kind of crappy and this one treats that one badly. It was that they're all kind of good and bad on different scales, obviously, but I think that makes reading a book much more fun. That it's like,
thank you. It's certainly more fun to write anyway for me.
But a theme that I think with the book that I think is such a I don't know if it was intentional, and that's going to be my question, because I think it was so fantastic that you did it, was highlighting the international aspect of the Roman Empire, especially during this period. And you did that through the slaves. And you had this feature on Myths Baby with Liv, where you had this fantastic chat about racism now versus the ancient world, and how in the ancient world it was just if you were foreign, they were extremely xenophobic and they hated you and they would laugh at you. And I think that you did a beautiful job of showing that in the book by having all of the slaves be foreign and from these great families, pretty much, you know, even the Spanish girls that come through later on in the book, and you have Menander, who's Greek, Amara's Greek, Dido's from North Africa. So was that a thing that you knew you were going to write into the book, or did the theme just start happening?
That was really important to me right from the off, like really one of the major, but it's almost like a silent theme in that the book is written from Amara's perspective. So the Romans had no concept of race as it was eventually invented over the centuries. You know, they didn't categorize people into black and white in any way that would be recognizable to the modern world. You know, they, as you say, they could be very xenophobic. So they would focus on people's nationalities, but, you know, an obsession with skin color was not a thing for them. And certainly it was important to me that I explored the prejudices that existed at that time. So for instance, the British woman, there was a huge prejudice against British people, that they were stupid and only good for manual labor and savage. So that was the xenophobia against them. You know, it was a kind of thing, or you never buy a British slave to be your accountant. So whereas people from North Africa fitted absolutely seamlessly into the world. So, you know, often when we look back at this period, you can't even tell if a historical figure is brown or black, as we would consider it or categorize people, because this was so unimportant to the Romans in terms of how they categorize people. So although we know that Dido is from Carthage, I've not sort of lingered on that because it's not something that would register to Amara in that way. Whereas with Drusilla, say, who's from Ethiopia, that was more unusual. So she will notice that she looks different. So it was trying to, but again, not sort of overly focus on it, because blackness just wouldn't have the same connotations. There wasn't that type of racism. And Ethiopia was at this period well on its way to becoming a global power, you know, so any prejudices would be quite different. So yeah, it was interesting to do that, to sort of do that research and to really think about it, but then not to make it obvious in the book, because how can you have a character notice something that is non-existent to their world? So it's nice that you picked up on it and Liv picked up on it, because it was there deliberately, but I didn't want to labor the point.
Well, I think to a lot of us, and I can't speak for Liv, but I think it's probably the same thing, that I think that's a conversation that all of us really want to have is about that, because it is such an important thing when even reading ancient texts to understand that it was just who doesn't speak the right language or who doesn't come from the right background. Like, that was very important to them. And I think that sometimes, a lot of times, and everybody is subject to it, we go into something with a modern perspective and then project onto it. So I think that
make the world much whiter than it would have been.
Exactly. And so I think that the way that it was done in this book, like you said, it was really subtle, but it was there. And I really appreciate that it was there, because we get that foreign aspect to the empire.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously that foreign aspect literally drove the entire empire.
And there was a lot of attitudes about Greek people. That was one of the reasons I made Amara Greek. You know, there was this sort of really strange dual association for the Roman world between obviously the high culture that they admired, of you know, Greek literature, Greek democracy, all these things that is famous now, but also, you know, a lot of Greek people were enslaved. So it had this kind of dual association with slavery and high culture. So it's a, I don't know that there's any particular modern equivalent, but I wanted to explore that in Amara's sense of herself and also in the way that she's perceived.
So as I've said in multiple videos, and I have written in multiple different spaces, whether it be Instagram or my website, I learned a lot from this book. And one of the things that I didn't know was even a thing was contraception. in the ancient world. And so when you wrote it, I literally have so many notes of me being like, go Google this. And so I would then, you know, come home and Google all these things and find everything that you wrote in the book, the sponge for birth control, the herbs for abortion. So what made you want to include those things as part of that story?
Well, I mean, I just think it's inevitable that women in a brothel would have to be concerned with those issues. So, you know, they wouldn't want to be pregnant permanently, or even at all. So, I mean, and Pliny the Elder writes a lot about different types of contraception in the natural history, actually. And he did interview a lot of courtesans. Well, I don't know about a lot, but he did interview courtesans for that book. You know, he's somebody who just spoke to an awful lot of people about everything to incorporate it. So I gave, you know, examples. I used what would have been the most sort of effective method. That wasn't necessarily the most widespread method, you know, kind of to insert some sort of barrier. You know, and some people just wore charms, like completely useless stuff that would have had no impact at all. You know, the sort of reference to abortion is very, very fleeting. It's kind of in the line to, in a queue, you know, women talking about it. The herbs, again, the sort of herbal methods of abortion probably weren't that effective. The main form of contraception, I'm sorry to say, in the Roman world was exposure of a baby after birth. That was the sort of predominant and accepted way to deal with an unwanted pregnancy, which is just so awful. And I think really profoundly illustrates what a world it was that was not geared around the needs of women, because the absolute trauma of women having to do this, and it's referenced by men in so many different forms that just doesn't recognize the trauma, but recognizes women aren't happy about it. So it comes up as a plot device in a lot of plays, that, you know, a female character who's thought to be lowborn or enslaved turns out to be the daughter of some highborn character, and the woman couldn't bear to kill the baby, so she gave it away, and now here's the daughter back again, and, you know, happy ending. Or there's a surviving letter in which a husband sends this quite affectionate letter to his wife. I can't remember which century it is, but he's basically saying, you know, don't be a softie. If it's a girl, you have to get rid of it after it's born. And it's just so shocking in the context of this affectionate letter from a man to his wife. Yeah, and you just think, that was not coming from women. You know, that was not something that many women would choose to do. So that is something that, yeah, I wanted to reflect. I don't want to have any spoilers, and, you know, that I don't show anything like that in the book. You know, nobody exposes a baby in the book, but I wanted to show that it was a concern for women, that is something they wouldn't want to have to go through.
I mean, I think it's a good topic that you bring up. One, because people don't learn about it, even though it is, you know, we have these minimal writings and these lines and all of that. It's still important.
Yeah. Another thing that would happen is that people just couldn't afford to keep children. You know, the practice of abandoning babies was also just a reflection of extreme poverty. And, you know, people would know that they could pick up new slaves by going to the garbage dump where babies or toddlers might have been left, you know, just abandoned. And there's even a name that's been found, Stachorius, which means abandoned in the rubbish. So that is a name that might actually be given to someone. And yes, awful. So Victoria, who's enslaved in the brothel, you know, she's quite chippy, or proud is the wrong word, but, you know, she makes a thing of the fact that she was a rubbish dump baby, you know, and she's a fighter and she's a survivor. She was left out on the heap and she's made it, you know, she's alive. So yeah, things like that just illustrate to me how, even though human beings, I you know, do passionately believe whatever time period you're from, certain aspects of how we relate to each other remain pretty constant. In some ways, this is a totally alien world with utterly alien values in some areas. The fact that this was just an accepted part of life.
I didn't even know there was a name for that. That's wild to me.
Glorious, yeah.
Especially because obviously they would have all known what that was. It wasn't like your own little secret. It's like, oh, they all know that you were found in like a rubbish heap. Oh, that's awful. What a way to dehumanize someone.
Yes, well, I mean, the whole dehumanization of people who was enslaved is yeah, it's definitely a thing.
Well, my last question is about the first scene in the book. This is the only real explicit chat we're going to get about the book, because the first scene is so wonderfully chaotic. And I'm pretty sure I messaged you that immediately as well when I had read it, because I'm someone that doesn't like a slow burn, and this was absolutely not a slow burn whatsoever. But it focuses on the women basically having a failure at the baths. That's how you open the book, which I think was a very interesting choice. Why did you choose them to fail rather than succeed in the first scene?
I think, Amara's going on a journey, and it wasn't like a whole load of successes. Her success is not guaranteed at any point in the book. In fact, she has an extraordinarily precarious existence, and she has to become increasingly risk-taking in order to try and get out of the situation she's in. I mean, the whole book is her trying to achieve her freedom to get out of the brothel. So, I wanted to sort of show how any attempt to better herself was quite fraught, which is why I had it at the beginning that there would be this failure. And it also illustrates, that the pimp is trying to be more ambitious. So Felix is trying to generate more income. And I felt that was a more interesting way of opening it, to just show how on the edge all these people's lives were, because they are very much on the margins.
I mean, and I think it just, literally when I was reading it, I was so confused in a good way. It was a good kind of confusion, because I was like, who are all these people? What are they doing? Why is this guy punching the other guy? Hold on. What's happening?
It starts with a massive brawl.
Which was good though, because I feel like not that the rest of the book is chaotic, but in a sense their lives are quite chaotic because they're completely out of their control. And I think it did a good job of setting that scene by showing it.
It's an underworld. Felix in many ways is a bit of a mafia guy, a small town mafia pimp.
I definitely got that vibe.
All sorts of dodgy side things going on, as well as his pimping. So yeah.
So that's all we have time for today though, unfortunately. Crying face emoji. So thank you so much to Elodie for sitting down and for chatting with me. It is about 8 p.m. currently on a Wednesday evening, so this is amazing that you have taken the time out of your day to do that. I feel really, really lucky, and so thank you so much. And I know that our viewers also do appreciate it. Now, for all of you guys, if you would like to buy Elodie's book or just follow her on social media, you can find all of Elodie's links in the description below, along with on my website, www.moaninc.co.uk. I do constantly have everything linked up there in case you lose this video at some point. I don't know how YouTube works, or in case it comes down. You can always check out our website and you can find Elodie from there and her book. So thank you so much, though, for watching this interview. It really does mean the world to both me and to Elodie. So we'll see you next time with more content here on Moan Inc. We'll see you then.